Lisa Nandy.
Speaker, and I wanted to start by saying what a pleasure it is to follow the member for Stafford, and I agreed with so much of what he said. And to say to the Minister that I think to be fair to the Minister, he's right to acknowledge, as we do on this side, that some of the problems that are propelling people into food banks in this country have deep roots and a long history that go back beyond the time that his government has been in office. But we simply have to acknowledge the explosion in the scale of the problem in recent years. We cannot have a sane and sensible debate about how to resolve this problem if ministers refuse to acknowledge that over the last 4 years, the numbers of people relying on Trussell Trust food banks alone, and there are many other food banks around the country, has gone up from 41,000 people in 2010 to nearly 1 million people now. And that we've seen in those years food banks like the Brick in my constituency springing up to fill need and demand, many other people too frightened or humiliated to even go and ask for help. And the sight of the British Red Cross, more used to working in countries that are torn apart by war, famine and disaster, launching their first ever emergency appeal in this country, one of the richest countries in the world, to feed and clothe our children. Frankly, Mr. Speaker, we should be ashamed of ourselves, and we have to start by acknowledging that and acknowledging the heartbreaking reality, as all of my honourable friends will know who visited food banks in their own constituency, of what it means to see the reality facing children, a nation that will not feed its children. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
Very good speech, as always. There is agreement on both sides of the House at how well food banks are performing, how well organisations like Tesco's are doing, how generous our constituents are in giving money and food to food banks. What's missing from the government side, I'm sure she will agree, is the anger that we have food banks in this country. And that's what I saw when I was collecting at Tesco's in Brook Green, that people are so concerned.
I have to say too that the Minister's warm words and praise for many of those charities who are running those food banks would be a lot more convincing if his government hadn't just tried to gag them from speaking out about it by passing the Lobbying Act, which we will repeal. And I have to say to the Minister that one of the reasons that we've got such a problem is because the safety net that those charities campaigned for and that we built in the last century has been allowed to collapse in this one. And what was provided once as a right is now provided as charity. And it is that, in the end, that lies behind the humiliation facing many of the people who are forced to work miles to go to food banks, and the gnawing anxiety that they live with on a daily basis, not knowing where their next meal is going to come from. I'll give way.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. Will she be as shocked as I am? A very recent case, but typical of so many, of a couple that came to see me and told me that their mother, an elderly woman who'd been looking after them and feeding them because they couldn't get any support, had actually had to go into hospital suffering from malnutrition.
He's absolutely right. And in the short time that I've got left available to me, I wanted to talk about the solutions to these problems. And the first solution, and this tackles something that is a long-term trend in this country, is that work has to pay. And far too many people in this country have been forced into work that is low wage, zero or small hours. And one of my constituents wrote to me before this debate and said that she was forced into a job where she was only given on average 15 minutes of work a day over the course of a week. £1.10 a day didn't even cover the cost of a bus fare, and when she left that job she was sanctioned, got into debt and ended up having to go to a food bank. The solutions are obvious. Raise the minimum wage, encourage firms to pay the living wage. And I'd be interested to know, when the Minister went to Tesco, did he ask that company why they don't pay all their staff a living wage? Because those people who claim to be part of the solution can also be part of the problem, and it is the government's job to set the tone of what we expect from our major employees. And I'd say to the Minister too that in communities like mine there is a real issue about the amount of jobs that are available, and if this government doesn't invest in order to create jobs, it is no use telling people to get on their bike and go and get a job. And the second thing that ministers must do is to rebuild the safety net. I don't know if the Minister understands this, but the truth is that the bedroom tax has done so much damage to people in communities like mine, and it must be scrapped immediately. And the benefits delays that people have talked about already and my honourable friends have mentioned are so important in all of this. I have people in my constituency who are waiting 6 months just to get an assessment for employment support allowance. And on top of that, we've had the introduction of the universal credit, which in principle, I support, but the truth is that many people are now managing budgets that they never ever had to deal with before, and it's propelled many, many people not just into debt but into the arms of payday lenders that this government refuses to do anything about. And if the Minister was at all vaguely interested in the experiences of my constituents, which he doesn't appear to be because he seems to be talking to his honourable friends, what he would learn is that the culture within the job centre, now I won't give way because I think it's about time ministers listened rather than tried to tell us that there is no problem in this country. The cultural change that is needed within the job centre that strips people routinely of their rights and their dignity will come from getting rid of these unofficial targets for sanctions and restoring advisor discretion so that organisations can work with people and not against people in their search for work. And I'll say this to the Minister, while he's sitting there and while he's finally paying attention to the experiences of my constituents, what a waste all of this is. He talked about food banks. Well, I'll tell you something, there is a growing recognition across all political parties that in the current economic climate we desperately need to harness the talents and the passion and the energies of people in every community across this country to make this country fairer and stronger and better and more sustainable. But instead we've got charities like cancer charities, like children's charities that instead of supporting people at the hardest times in their life are able to do little more than feed and clothe children in one of the richest countries in the world. What a tremendous waste all of this is.